For months, the name Chen Zhi has been absent from headlines. No new photos, no public appearances, no official statements. Yet, in the quiet corners of Phnom Penh's financial district, something strange is happening. Shell companies are reappearing under new names. Familiar luxury cars with old Prince Group license plates are back on the streets. And insiders whisper about a man moving through private meetings, unseen but unmistakably in control. It's been over a year since the once untouchable Cambodian tycoon vanished under the shadow of international money laundering investigations. And now the world is asking the same question. Is Chen Zhi preparing for a comeback under a new identity? What follows is not just a story about a fallen billionaire. It's a story about power without a face, about how wealth can outlive reputation, and about how a man once accused of transforming Cambodia into a playground for offshore empires may now be quietly rewriting his legacy. As evidence mounts, from corporate filings to digital fingerprints, one thing becomes clear. Chen Zhi may have disappeared from the spotlight, but the empire he built is very much alive. And somewhere in the shadows, its architect may already be building his next act. When Chen Zhi vanished from public view, it seemed as though one of Southeast Asia's most visible billionaires had evaporated overnight. The Prince Group billboards that once covered Phnom Penh were stripped down. His name was erased from company directories. His personal photographs were quietly deleted from official websites. To the casual observer, it looked like a clean exit, the downfall of a man whose empire had become synonymous with corruption and greed. But behind the scenes, something entirely different was unfolding. Financial records obtained from Cambodia's corporate registry revealed that not a single Prince subsidiary had formally ceased operations. In fact, several continued to sign multi-million-dollar contracts for real estate developments, telecom projects, and pharmaceutical investments, often using new signatories with unfamiliar names. These figures were not strangers. They were longtime associates of Chen Zhi, his inner circle of executives who had suddenly become owners overnight. By mid-2024, the once lavish Prince real estate headquarters in Phnom Penh's Tonle Basak district appeared deserted, yet employees quietly returned each morning through a side entrance. They no longer wore company uniforms, and all official correspondence bore a different logo, Oriental Capital Holdings. But investigators noticed that the payroll system, email servers, and even internal Wi-Fi networks remained identical to those of Prince Group. In essence, Chen Zhi had not truly disappeared. He had muted his identity, rebranding his empire without ever surrendering control. Insiders describe the days following his disappearance as a carefully rehearsed operation. The group's senior accountants were flown to Singapore, where they allegedly helped transfer assets into nominee accounts registered under relatives and trusted Cambodian partners. Meanwhile, high-ranking Cambodian officials, who once flaunted their association with Chen Zhi, began referring to him only by his initials, CZ, in private conversations. According to one banking source, this was not exile, it was camouflage. At the same time, luxury properties once owned by Prince Group were sold to obscure offshore entities for symbolic prices. The glittering Prince Times Hotel, valued at nearly $200 million, changed ownership on paper 3 times in 6 months, yet the same management team remained on site. Even the hotel's security personnel, recognizable by their black suits and identical earpieces, were the same men who once guarded Chen Zhi's mansion. What the public saw as a collapse was, in reality, a controlled retreat, designed to shield assets before regulators or international law enforcement agencies could trace them. Throughout 2024, the Cambodian business community remained strangely silent. Officials offered vague explanations that Chen Zhi was cooperating or on leave, while private bankers described ongoing negotiations involving his network in Hong Kong and Macau. By then, whispers began circulating that a foreign investor had begun buying back portions of land once tied to Prince Group through intermediaries. Those deals were traced to a newly incorporated firm in Singapore, managed by a woman believed to be Chen Zhi's longtime assistant. In the end, the so-called disappearance of Chen Zhi was less a vanishing act and more an elegant sleight of hand, one that relied on the loyalty of insiders, the opacity of offshore jurisdictions, and the political convenience of silence. On paper, the empire had dissolved. In reality, it had merely changed its skin. Not long after the Prince Group began dissolving its public identity, a new constellation of companies quietly appeared across Singapore, Cambodia, and the British Virgin Islands. Each bore a polished name that sounded legitimate enough to blend into the region's booming investment landscape: Emerald Holdings Limited, Golden Sunrise Ventures, Vanguard Asia Investment, Celadon International Development, and Brightwave Capital Partners. But investigators noticed a pattern that was too precise to be coincidence. The directors listed on these entities, young Chinese or Singaporean nationals with no visible business history, all shared one connection. They had previously worked under Prince subsidiaries. Some had been mid-level managers at Prince Bank or executive assistants in the group's Phnom Penh office. Others had signed minor contracts for Prince Real Estate, their names now elevated to chairman or CEO. What these new entities lacked in public profile, they made up for in strategic design. Their office addresses were often linked to virtual business suites or law firms known for establishing offshore structures. Financial experts describe this as a textbook move to create a buffer between Chen Zhi and his past, allowing him to re-enter regional markets through intermediaries. In one case, Vanguard Asia Investment, officially led by a 29-year-old Singaporean national, began acquiring stakes in Cambodian land projects previously owned by Prince Group, often at heavily discounted prices. The money trail led through UOB Bank Singapore and an offshore fund in the British Virgin Islands that once financed Prince's luxury developments. The use of shell companies wasn't new for Chen Zhi. During his peak years, he had already experimented with multi-layered corporate veils, moving funds from Hong Kong through Belize and finally into Cambodian subsidiaries to disguise the true source of capital. But after his disappearance, this system evolved into something more sophisticated, a network of reborn identities. Each new company served a single purpose: to legally distance ongoing operations from his tarnished name while maintaining control through silent partners. According to leaked documents, many of these firms shared identical templates for board resolutions, financial filings, and email domains. Even the formatting of official letters was the same as those used by Prince Group, hinting that they were produced by the same administrative team, just under different banners. One particularly striking case involved Emerald Holdings Limited, which began sponsoring charity projects in Phnom Penh that mirrored Prince Group's former philanthropic initiatives. The events were nearly identical: same venues, same catering, same photographers, only now the banners displayed the Emerald logo. Observers in Cambodia's business press joked that it felt like watching Prince Group in witness protection. Financial intelligence analysts in Hong Kong suspect that these new fronts were established to anticipate future sanctions from Western governments. If the US Treasury were to blacklist Prince Group or Chen Zhi personally, these shell firms could continue business unaffected. The assets, from luxury hotels to energy projects, would remain operational under new ownership, preserving their revenue flow. In short, Chen Zhi's empire was being digitally reincarnated, stripped of its old name but not its substance. Meanwhile, internal communications from Singapore-based service providers show discussions about rebranding legacy assets and strategic management continuity. And those are sanitized corporate phrases, but in context, they mean one thing: Chen Zhi was rebuilding from within. He no longer needed to appear in front of cameras or sign documents in his own name. The system he had built was doing that for him, a machine of proxies, each disposable, each replaceable. By mid-2025, the pattern was undeniable. Across the region, new firms with the same handwriting of Prince Group were buying, selling, and investing again. Only the man behind them had changed his mask. In the modern world, disappearing is no longer just about changing your name or fleeing to another country. It's about erasing your digital fingerprint, and few have done it as meticulously as Chen Zhi. Within weeks of his vanishing act, every trace of his online presence began to dissolve. The official Prince Group website was quietly redesigned, removing his portrait and replacing his biography with generic statements about collective leadership. His once public Instagram account, which flaunted images of private jets, charity galas, and ribbon-cutting ceremonies, was deleted without a trace. Archived press releases vanished from Cambodian news sites. Even his Wikipedia page, once curated with precision, was locked down and stripped of citations. But this wasn't a coincidence. Digital analysts now believe it was a coordinated purge, orchestrated by a professional crisis management team hired to sanitize Chen Zhi's online identity before he could re-emerge as someone else. The cleanup, however, wasn't perfect. Cyber forensics specialists tracking the case discovered that many of the new corporate websites associated with Emerald Holdings, Vanguard Asia, and other rebranded firms were hosted on the same IP addresses that once belonged to Prince Group's servers. The metadata embedded in PDF documents and marketing materials, timestamps, font structures, even image tags revealed the same design signatures. In some cases, files listed the same hidden author name, CZ Admin. It was as if the digital ghost of Chen Zhi still haunted the architecture of every new venture. More curious was the sudden emergence of a media personality in Phnom Penh's online business scene, a young entrepreneur named Zhao Min, fluent in English and Mandarin, promoting sustainable investments and philanthropy through slick video interviews. Observers noted that his speech patterns, intonation, and phrasing were uncannily similar to Chen Zhi's. Some speculated Zhao Min was a stand-in, a public face created to embody the new identity of the rebranded empire, while the real mastermind stayed in the background. Rumors swirled that Chen Zhi had funded AI-driven image manipulation and deepfake PR campaigns to gradually shift public association away from his own likeness and onto these substitutes. Evidence of this digital transformation went beyond Cambodia. On Chinese social media platforms, fan accounts that once promoted Prince Group's charity events suddenly began sharing content about Zhao Min Holdings, using the same hashtags, same captions, and even identical stock photos, only now the names and faces had been swapped. Analysts described it as a digital laundering of identity, a process as deliberate and complex as financial laundering. By recycling his own media assets under a different name, Chen Zhi effectively washed his reputation clean in front of a new online audience. Even private communications revealed traces of his digital shadow. An encrypted Telegram channel, known among insiders as Phoenix Circle, continued to distribute business updates that mirrored Prince Group's internal memos. The writing style, syntax, and tone were identical to Chen Zhi's emails from years before. Though no one could prove his direct involvement, digital linguists estimated a 92% authorship match. All these pieces suggest one thing: Chen Zhi was no longer content to hide. He was re-engineering his identity for a second life. By manipulating algorithms, redirecting search results, and constructing new personas, he turned the internet itself into camouflage. He didn't just delete his past, he replaced it. And in doing so, he discovered something extraordinary. In the digital age, you don't have to disappear to be invisible. You just need to rewrite the code. If Chen Zhi's name vanished from headlines, his money certainly didn't. The financial lifeblood of his empire continued to pulse, just under different labels, flowing through new arteries that led far beyond Cambodia. When investigators traced the collapse of Prince Group's financial web, they expected to find drained accounts and seized properties. Instead, what they discovered was a seamless metamorphosis. The same bank accounts that once handled Prince's real estate transactions now funded ventures in renewable energy, health tech, and AI startups across Singapore, Malaysia, and the United Arab Emirates. Documents from the Monetary Authority of Singapore showed that months before the US began tightening sanctions on suspicious Cambodian investments, a flood of transfers, totaling more than $400 million, moved from Prince-affiliated accounts into newly registered firms like Blue Horizon Medical, Solarity Renewables, and Next Wave Technologies. These companies were, on paper, unrelated to Chen Zhi, yet their directors included familiar figures: a Cambodian accountant who once managed payroll for Prince Bank, a Chinese lawyer from Guangdong who had represented Prince in 2019, and a former PR officer who now operated as business development consultant. The network was unmistakable: Prince Group reborn under a new economic disguise. But the real brilliance wasn't in the movement of money, it was in the illusion of legitimacy. Instead of hiding in tax havens, Chen Zhi's new structures began to position themselves as partners in green innovation. Solar farms in Sihanoukville, eco-resorts in Africa's coastlines, and medical research hubs in Dubai were announced with fanfare, often backed by social media campaigns featuring philanthropic messaging. To the public, it looked like a redemption arc, a disgraced empire transformed into a force for good. To insiders, it was simply the same fortune with a new costume. The deeper one looked, the clearer the continuity became. A forensic audit found that invoice formats, email templates, and even staff contact numbers for Blue Horizon Medical matched those once used by Prince Group subsidiaries. The company's early-stage investment capital, supposedly coming from Middle Eastern partners, had actually been routed through an offshore intermediary in the British Virgin Islands that previously funded Prince's property projects. In essence, Chen Zhi's empire had achieved what few oligarchs ever could. It survived by evolving faster than the system could detect. Dubai soon became the new epicenter of his silent operations. Financial filings linked to Emirates Crown Holdings, a firm specializing in real estate technology, revealed heavy funding from accounts once associated with Prince Bank. The projects bore familiar trademarks: extravagant branding, vague business models, and aggressive public relations. More interestingly, one of these ventures listed its strategic advisor as CZ Liang, a name that appeared nowhere before 2024, but was now signing off on million-dollar deals. Linguistic analysis of emails attributed to Liang suggested near-perfect alignment with Chen Zhi's writing patterns. The reappearance of funds in Dubai and Singapore was not random, it was insurance. With Cambodia under increasing scrutiny, Chen Zhi was diversifying his empire into regions with friendlier regulatory climates and less media attention. A significant portion of his new wealth, experts believe, came from cryptocurrency conversion, using decentralized exchanges to disguise origins. That money later re-emerged as investments in blockchain-driven logistics firms and AI development parks. What was once real estate had become data. What was once corruption had become innovation. By mid-2025, Chen Zhi had accomplished what no regulator could predict. He didn't run from his fortune, he reshaped it. The money hadn't fled Cambodia. It had simply changed its name, its function, and its moral identity. And like its owner, it now wore a new mask, one polished enough to fool the world. By the summer of 2025, the whispers had become impossible to ignore. In the exclusive lounges of Phnom Penh's Rosewood Hotel, executives began referring again to Boss CZ, a name once spoken with fear, now with quiet curiosity. Chauffeurs who once drove for Prince Group were suddenly seen escorting new clients in the same signature black Lexus SUVs, their license plates curiously identical to the ones confiscated 2 years earlier. At private charity galas, the champagne tasted expensive, the photographers were discreet, and yet something felt eerily familiar. The same floral arrangements, the same public relations staff, the same seating order once dictated by Chen Zhi's inner circle. To those paying attention, it felt less like coincidence and more like a soft rehearsal for a comeback. What fueled the speculation further was a series of business moves that mirrored Chen Zhi's playbook. A new holding firm, Trinity Capital Asia, began acquiring strategic assets that once belonged to Prince Group, high-end condominiums, beachfront developments, and even several local media outlets. Though the company claimed to be funded by Singaporean investors, leaked correspondence suggested that its internal memos were written in Chen Zhi's characteristic style, formal yet cryptic, full of motivational slogans and instructions to avoid visibility. Among Cambodia's business elite, a rumor spread that Chen Zhi was preparing to re-enter the market under an alternate persona, one designed to appear younger, more progressive, and aligned with green capitalism. The illusion grew more elaborate when Zhao Min, the mysterious entrepreneur who had emerged months earlier, began hosting televised interviews promoting Cambodia as the next sustainable hub of Asia. Observers couldn't help but notice how his gestures and speech patterns echoed Chen Zhi's earlier interviews word for word. Conspiracy theories exploded online, suggesting that Zhao Min was either a digitally engineered persona or a body double, an avatar through which Chen Zhi could reclaim influence without exposing himself to scrutiny. Satellite data and travel records didn't help. Both men seemed to appear in the same cities, Singapore, Dubai, Phnom Penh, within days of each other, but never simultaneously. Meanwhile, political shifts in Cambodia created fertile ground for such a return. Several ministers who had distanced themselves from Prince Group after the scandal suddenly began defending the contributions of foreign investors in public speeches. Land projects, frozen during the investigation phase, were quietly resumed under new ownership titles. When Emerald Holdings won a multi-million-dollar tender to develop a smart city zone in Kampot, the deal was signed in record time, without public bidding. Insiders called it what it was, Prince Group 2.0. The public, too, seemed ready to forget. In a country where development often trumps justice, the narrative of Chen Zhi's alleged crimes was slowly replaced by nostalgia. At least Prince created jobs, some would say. Social media posts praising Cambodia's new wave of investors began surfacing again, their tone suspiciously similar to old Prince PR campaigns. It was as if the population itself was being conditioned for his return, yet beneath the surface, fear lingered. Diplomats from the US Embassy quietly cautioned Phnom Penh officials about re-engaging with Prince-linked entities, while international watchdogs flagged renewed financial activity linked to Chen Zhi's network. But in the opaque balance of Cambodian politics, warnings rarely outweigh wealth. The same system that allowed Chen Zhi to build his empire might soon welcome him back, as long as the money kept flowing and the name stayed different. By late 2025, one final clue surfaced. A leaked investor document from Trinity Capital Asia bore a digital signature, CZ Liang, the same alias traced to Chen Zhi's Dubai ventures. If that link proves genuine, it means his return isn't speculation. It's already happening. The empire never died. It simply waited. And now, it may be stepping out of the shadows once more. In the end, Chen Zhi never truly vanished. He simply learned to exist beyond the reach of light. His empire, once the pride of Cambodia's new elite, has become a ghost network that thrives without a face, without a name, yet still commands the same fear and admiration it always did. From offshore vaults in Dubai to luxury compounds in Phnom Penh, the evidence of his influence remains everywhere, polished, silent, and untouchable. The story of Chen Zhi isn't just about one man's fall or survival. It's about the limits of accountability in a world where money moves faster than justice, where a reputation can be deleted like a web page, and where truth itself can be rewritten through careful design. For some, his return will symbolize resilience, a fallen billionaire who rebuilt himself in defiance of scandal. For others, it will be the ultimate warning that power unchecked never disappears, it only changes form. Whether as CZ, Liang, Chaomin, or another invented name yet to come, Chen Zhi's shadow still hovers over Cambodia's skyline, unseen, but always there. The question is no longer if he will return, but how many times he already has without anyone noticing. Because in the world Chen Zhi built, the greatest trick isn't escaping exposure, it's making the world forget you were ever caught.